Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Dynamic Accountability and How to Start. I'm Erica Baranda, Project Coordinator from Accountable Now, and I will be accompanying you on the entire webinar. We will also be hearing from Annabel Cruz, Co-Coordinator of Rendir Cuentas, and Eskia Karsu, Program Manager of Accountable Now. They will be sharing with us their experiences adopting the dynamic accountability through the global standard. And as the title says, we're going to be learning how can we start engaging and practicing dynamic accountability. And to do so, we will be talking briefly on what the concept of dynamic accountability. Some of you, if you joined our previous webinar, you learned a bit more what it is. We're gonna just go through a brief introduction. Then once we started talking about what's dynamic accountability, we'll think, what does it actually look like for my organization? And that's where the global standard will come. That will give us this picture of how dynamic accountability will actually represent and look like within our organizations, in which dimensions they can work with. And then from there, we could see get a bit more practical and learn from Annabelle and Esgi their own experiences with the tools that they develop in order to adopt better the global standard and how to improve their accountability practices. Please, if you have any question, please share it with us through the chat. We will answer all the questions at the end. And also, if you found something interesting or some interesting takeaway, please join the conversation in Twitter through the hashtag dynamic accountability, hashtag be accountable, as this is an event part of the Dynamic Accountability Week and also the Global Accountability Week. So please join the conversation. Let's start talking about dynamic accountability. So to start with, I just want to talk a bit about what is dynamic accountability and what are we talking about. So stakeholder engagement with something that we talk all the time, feedback, participatory practices, they're becoming familiar concepts in our work. However, we must ask ourselves, are we really engaging with our stakeholders in a meaningful way? Are we letting them really influence the way we work and our decisions? Are we actually sharing the power? And that's where dynamic accountability comes, where it challenges our own way of working with our stakeholders, of engaging with them. And it means losing our hold on power and share it with them. It means transforming the way we're engaging with them. Instead of telling them what should we think, what should they hold us accountable to, we should be asking them what and how can we be accountable to them. So the question changes, and we're putting them at the center of our way of working. Another thing, another aspect that highlights from dynamic accountability is this constant and continuous dialogue with them in our work, where we open up our organizations, we talk honestly about what are the work, our resources, the successes and failures, and we also create spaces where they can participate, listen, that we can listen to them and really reflect on our practice and see how can we improve our work. And based on that, it comes a very crucial part of dynamic accountability is that we go back to talk with them once we start the reflection within our organizations. If the feedback is over and the dialogue it repeats itself over and over again, it's not one time, it's a continuous dialogue and engagement. And where we put them in at the core of our decision making, and we share the power with them. And then when we're talking about dynamic accountability, this is a very abstract concept, let's call it, and it's what drives organizations like Accountable Now, like Rendir Cuentas, and other partners to change the way we practice. We thought about the global standard in a way that it creates a picture of how dynamic accountability would look like in our organizations. It creates this set of 12 commitments or goals that they show different dimensions in which our accountability we aspire to improve, and we work with in general terms. We present the way what we want to achieve, our approach to change, and what we do internally. As you can see, these 12 commitments are very broad. It can go from us delivering lasting and positive changes. It can also we are talking about also ensuring that our work is people driven and that we are open organizations. How can we become open organizations, and how can our own leadership become responsive to people in stakeholders? So we're trying to start, we can see it as this first as looking at the global standard as a conversation starter among our organization, and start reflecting on how we're actually practicing accountability. How can we change the way we do accountability? And for that, I would invite Annabelle a bit on telling us how some of the ways we can start these conversations within organizations, such as with the tool of the self-assessment tool. Annabelle, if you can share with us your experience. It seems you're having technical difficulties. What I would propose for now is that we hear a bit about Accountable Now's experience, and from there we go back to Annabelle, and so that we can work a bit the technical part.
Hi everyone, this is Ezgi from Accountable Now. So I'm going to tell you about our experience with the global standard and the approach we took, which was alignment. I would say this is probably one of the strictest, if I could put it like that, ways of engaging, or not strictest, but a very detailed way covering all of the various commitments. So what we did is we had an old framework of 10 accountability commitments, and we decided to replace these entirely with the 12 accountability commitments of the global standard. And in line with that, we have a reporting mechanism whereby our members submit accountability reports to us every year. So of course it was important to get those questions in line with the new commitments as well. So this is a very detailed way of assessing performance against the 12 commitments and against dynamic accountability, which is this underpinning concept of the commitment. And just to give you a bit of an idea about how we do this, once our members submit their accountability reports to us, we go through them. We have an independent panel of experts who give detailed feedback on each of the questions that we ask. So that's kind of the overall way that we engage with the global standard. But to tell you about how we got there and the process, I think I would say that we had it, as Accountable Now, we had it pretty easy because we were obviously one of the 9 project partners involved in developing the global standard. And so our members were involved in this process as well. We had consultations with them when we were formulating the global standards commitments, and then very specific consultations as well when we were formulating the reporting questions. So it wasn't something entirely new to our members. They were involved in the process and there was a lot of buy-in. So at that level, I would say that we did pretty well. And then the second level is how our members themselves began engaging with the new commitments and the new questions. So in our experience, those members who already had well-developed reporting frameworks and systems had it easiest because the new questions and the new commitments we developed weren't that different to the old ones we had. They were just a bit more dynamic, a bit broader, and allowed our members to engage with the topics that are most relevant to their areas of work. So there was already this knowledge within the organization about accountability reporting, and it was a matter of tweaking the internal systems to come in line with the new framework. But I would say that there were a few challenges. I mean, this dynamic accountability approach does require a lot more openness to giving up power, let's say, and really bringing in a lot of different voices from a lot of different levels. So we have seen some of our members opening up their decision-making processes, really bringing in a lot more voices from the ground into this. But dynamic accountability also forces us to have some more difficult conversations, particularly internally, I would say. We're asking a lot more about, the impact we're having, some of the challenges we're facing. And so I would say that leadership buy-in at the highest level is very important for this. In our experience, we've seen with members where the chief executive is very much on board, this tends to trickle down throughout the organization, and we see lots of different parts of the organization getting involved. Whereas in the past, it might have just been the monitoring and evaluation point who would compile these reports, and accountability would really sit with them. We're really seeing this starting to spread throughout the organization. And of course, this requires not just leadership buy-in, but buy-in from the rest of the team within the organization. So that would bring me to the second challenge, perhaps, or point to focus on, which is really explaining what dynamic accountability is and why it's important for the organization, what the value is. And I think we've seen, again, our members who have managed to explain this to their teams, to different point people within the organization, have had really great success. They've told us that accountability has become much more prominent within the organization. It's really been put on the agenda, and it's become more of an ongoing point of conversation, of consideration, whereas in the past, the reporting process might have been something that happened within 1 month of the year. Now it's really become something that our members consider throughout their various planning processes, when they're evaluating how their work has been going, and really ideally in everything they do. So maybe another mini challenge, or perhaps a bit of a barrier, is that the 12 commitments can seem quite overwhelming if you take them all at once. You look at them, there are 12 things that you need to take care of, that you need to improve your performance on. And for some organizations, it can be challenging to tackle all of these things at once. So what we've tried to really promote is the approach of learning and continuous improvement. So we really encourage our members not to feel they have to become an expert on all of these things overnight, but that they can really use the commitments and the clusters of the commitments to pick an area in which they think they should improve and focus in on that. Maybe there might be different teams within the organization that might want to focus on different commitments. So I think by breaking it down, it makes it much more manageable. And we've had members reporting to us on their accountability practices for 10 years now. And I don't think anyone is perfect yet. And I don't think that will ever happen, because as the dynamic accountability concept suggests, there's always going to be something new that we can look at, something to improve a little bit more on. So it's really just a matter of finding where you are at the moment, what you can focus on with the resources you have. I would say that's another possible barrier, especially for very small organizations with just a few team members, it can also be difficult to dedicate the time to focus on these issues. But if you break it down and if you can really understand how dynamic accountability will improve your work and your impact in the end, that's where we've seen the successes. And that brings me to the last thing that I would share, which is the successes we've heard from our members. I mean, this has been the first year that our members are working with the new commitments and the new reporting questions. So it's been a bit of a testing phase, shall we say. But we've definitely heard overwhelmingly positive feedback. We've heard that the reports focusing on dynamic accountability have been much more useful within the organization. As I said earlier, they facilitate more conversations around accountability. But on the other hand, they've also found the feedback that we provide to them has been much more accurate and tailored to their positions. Someone has said, we read the panel's feedback this week and we thought, yes, this encapsulates exactly what our organization is and what we're doing, what we're struggling with, and how we can improve. So that's been really encouraging to hear. And I think one other positive is that our accountability reports are now much more interesting to read and therefore to share with other stakeholders. Because we have these 12 overarching concepts guiding the reports, it's much easier to pick out relevant things for your stakeholders on the ground, or for donors, or for other stakeholders within your organization, and really share these aspects with them and use it as a conversation starter. So all of that said, I do think it's still a work in progress for us, how we work with the global standard and the 12 commitments. I think we need to keep re-examining the commitments and the questions we ask within our reporting framework. We've seen that current issues, such as the safeguarding crisis this year, or the emergence of a bigger focus on digital technology, these things prompt us to think about whether we are doing enough. So I think we're always going to be re-examining the questions and the way we engage with these questions. And we're always open to suggestions as to how we can improve. So if any of you happen to take a look and have any ideas for us, we're always pleased to hear that. And I think the other thing we're going to keep doing is providing more and more guidance on how to use the 12 commitments and the reporting questions, even for our members who have been very much involved in accountability processes throughout the years. It can be a bit confusing. It can be difficult to know how to take concrete steps to improve or to even communicate the successes and innovative things they're doing. So as Accountable Now, we're really going to step that up and try to provide more guidance to our members. Yes, I think that is, in a nutshell, our experience with alignment. It's been a very interesting and exciting journey, and it's something that's definitely continuing. So on that note, I will hand back to Erica.
Thank you, Eski. Yes, thank you for sharing with us your experience with alignment. I think it's, as we said before, the 12 commitments can seem a very challenging thing, but even organizations with long history of accountability that were before doing the 10 commitments or the 10 commitments of Accountable Now, and now with the global standard, it's just building on previous experiences on accountability and just boosting it up, challenging us a bit step further, and then little by little we'll get to the 12 commitments, and then and also how we understand those 12 commitments will be changing throughout time. So thank you, and we'll see if Annabelle's still having problems, or we can learn a bit more on self-assessment, which is also another way that organizations can start looking on how their practices and policies and standards can be compared to the global standard. Annabelle?
I am here. I hope you can hear me. Just let me know. As you said, Erika, the self-assessment tool is a way to land in some way, to root the global standard into practice. So how to translate those 12 commitments and our promises into practices, and how to measure if we are really practicing what we preach. So what have we done? The global standard has 12 commitments, and you can use many indicators. The guidance materials that were prepared last year are a very good guidance in order to identify indicators, to identify key actions, to measure how far or not we are from the commitments of the global standard. So we have 12 commitments, and we have 4 indicators for each commitment, a total of 48. But we have chosen 2 kinds of indicators for each commitment. One is a progress indicator. Can you show the previous screen? There, as you see, the first one, the 2 first one, and this is for commitment 1. I'm sorry, it's still only in Spanish. It's been translated into English, and we are working together with the Balkan Civil Society Development Network to see if this can become more global. So 2 indicators are progress indicators. Have we done this? Are we progressing in doing this? The other 2 indicators for each commitment are feedback indicators. What do our stakeholders think? What do our constituents think? What does the staff of the organization think? So it's not only what you do, but the feedback and the conversations you interact with your own constituents, with the people you work with. This is talking about dynamic accountability. It's not only a self-compliance exercise, but a conversation, a multi-stakeholders dialogue with your different partners. So we are now in the process of implementing this tool in 4 countries after a co-creation process that has been very, very rich. That's one of the first lessons learned. It is very important, the commitment and the participation of all organizations in the preparation of this tool. That has been really a wonderful exercise. So now we are implementing this in Colombia, in Uruguay, in Argentina, and in Peru. We are coming in probably in 1 month, in 2 months, in 3 months, with more results and the analysis and of the results. And what do we want to do? We want to identify strengths and weaknesses in order to prepare different improvement plans for the organization. This is sort of pilot exercise that we hope it will be useful for us, for Latin America, and for the global community. Thank you so much, and I hope you have been able to listen my words this time. Thank you, Erika.